Okay, as maybe you already know by now because you got the email. Today's topic is what? What's the topic we are going to discuss today? It's loving kindness. Okay, loving kindness. Something I think you are familiar, at least to some extent. So there is something that you are more familiar. I think you are all familiar with love, no? Isn't it? Love is something that is something we have all experienced in various degrees in our lives, and it is something that also have a big impact on our lives. So think of a love lovers have for each other, okay? And then compare the same love, compare or make say try and compare and see the disparity to understand the love between lovers for each other and the love a mother has for her child. Is it the same or is it different?
Different, Bhante.
So here, when the Buddha taught us loving kindness meditation, he gave us a yardstick. No? What's the yardstick? What is the thing that we should base our loving kindness on? What should it be like? What form should it take? Loving kindness, the spiritual aspect, the Buddha pointed us out. In the Karaniyametta Sutta, we come across this yardstick. Can anyone answer?
Bhante, it should be like unconditional, right?
Unconditional. Then they used to simile there, no? Everyone can answer.
Unconditional,
Like
yeah,
a mother who loved the child.
Just as a mother would love the only child. The adjective, the only child is there, okay? So think how much a mother would love the only child more than the eyes even. No? That sort of love. And that's love, of course, it is, yes, unconditional. There are no conditions. So no matter what the child might do, good or bad, whatever personality characteristic he might have, whatever defects, maybe physical, maybe mental, he or she might have, then still the mother loves the child unconditionally. So the same principle applies here. So when you practice loving kindness, that principle, that yardstick, it applies. Why? Because we can't differentiate among beings when you practice loving kindness. Because I have come across instances where devotees ask that when they practice loving kindness, because they find it difficult to maybe spread loving kindness, have thoughts of love against some people. Okay? Like some people that there are people that they may detest. They are not only on friendly terms. So they would rather ask, like in the beginning, would it be okay if we first focus on our friends, our family? Then suddenly focus on people who are we are indifferent towards. Then later on, suddenly practice loving kindness toward the ones we actually do hate or have anger. So these type of questions have been asked from us. But can we do so? Can we practice loving kindness in that manner? No, that is not so. That is not possible. So, because according to teachings of the Buddha, if you are going to practice loving kindness, if your meditation in loving kindness is going to improve, then right from the beginning, right from the inception, when you practice loving kindness, you should have that mindset of spreading loving kindness to all beings of the world, unconditionally, boundless, just as a mother would love her only child. That's principle. That mindset is there, should be there. If you want to develop loving kindness, if you want to progress in the practice of loving kindness. So it is something that you have to bear in mind when practicing loving kindness. And it is very helpful to know the disadvantages of not practicing loving kindness, how a person suffers because of anger. Okay? Haven't you suffered in your life because of anger? Is it a good mental state? Or if you reflect upon your actions, the things you have said and done in the past, when you are angry, are they things that make you happy? Or does that bring about regret, remorse? You may have lost friends. Some may have even lost jobs. You never know, circumstances. So these things happen. Some fall in jail. Some kill people. Overwhelmed by anger. Because each person is different. Buddha gave a simile. For some, anger is, what is the simile? Anger is like a line drawn on water. It quickly disappears. There are such people. They get angry, they can then and there let go. But that is not the case for everyone. Some find it difficult. And then Buddha pointed out the other segment. For them, anger is like a line drawn on. Does someone know the simile? Line drawn on?
Sand.
Water.
The line drawn on sand. So when line is drawn on sand, it takes some time to disappear. It doesn't disappear then and there. Sometimes. So that anger is there for say a few hours, maybe day also, it can be there, but still he is able to let go after that. And then there are the third segment, those who find it very difficult for them to give up anger. For them, anger is like a line etched on
A rock.
stone.
On the rock.
Rock. Yeah.
So that is not going to go away. That becomes so anger. If you harbor anger, what's the next stage of anger? In Sinhala we say taraha. Then it become hatred. Okay? There's a sense of hostility, enmity. Hostility actually becomes when you become baddha vaira, we say deep-seated anger. Then he's hostile toward that person. He views that person as an enemy. So when he is an enemy, whatever chance you get to hurt that person, you will take that chance. You will act upon that opportunity to hurt that person, be it by verbal action, bodily action, in whatever way you are going to hurt that person. That is the nature of baddha vaira or hostility. Vengeance is there. Vengeance. That's a good translation for baddha vaira, vengeance. So in this way, you have to understand these mental states. So when anger arises in you, you have to nip it in the bud without, like saying, without keeping it, without harboring that anger, without nurturing the anger. So what are the two factors that give rise to anger? Why do we get angry? According to the teachings of the Buddha,
Ayoniso manasikara.
unwise consideration, yes. And what else? Amma?
No? Not having loving kindness.
These two things that create, these two things has to be present for there to anger arise, for anger to arise. If any one of these things are missing, anger will not arise in your life. So this is very important for you to understand. First factor, ayoniso manasikara, of course, unwise consideration. Then, patigha nimitta.
Yes.
Yes.
Why did you call? No, why did she call? I'm listening, but why did she call?
Okay, sign that triggered the anger. It can be a person, it can be an object, it can be a picture, whatever. It can be the environmental conditions, it can be rain, it can be the wind, whatever. This can trigger anger in you. That's the nature. So if these two things are present, surely anger will arise in you. So if you know these are the things that the conducive aspects, like these are the things that bring about anger, then if you want to get rid of anger, what you have to do? You have to take out one of these. Okay? So say if you are angry with a person, someone scolds you. Okay? Then how do you get rid of that angry state that arises in your mind? Can someone say the way to get rid of that anger? How do you get rid of anger? Someone scolds you. With reason or without reason. Say it is without reason, like you don't deserve to be regarded like that. But still you are in that manner. Then what? Then
Consider it as like just a sound coming. Don't like keep on thinking about it.
one way is to just to think it's a sound. Any other? Any other? So,
Replacing with a good thought, Bante. Replace that anger thought with a loving kindness thought.
what else?
To think good qualities of that person, especially if it's somebody who like you're close with, and if you get angry at that person, you just think about their good qualities.
So, okay.
Bante, how about saying that everything is impermanent? So it could be just a temporary thing, so you don't get upset and angry because things might change. So everything is impermanent.
Yes, Andy.
But they recognize.
Yeah. Okay. So in all instances, in your answers, so what is the basis for that answer? You have replaced unwise consideration with wise consideration. When you think of impermanence, that is what? Wise consideration. When you think it's just a sound, what's happening there? There is the ear, there is the sound, there is ear consciousness. The unification of these three give rise to ear contact. Then there is the unpleasant feeling that gave rise to anger. So in this way, when you break down the conditional phenomena here, then you take out of the self view. Because you feel I have been scolded. He scolded me. You are thinking in that manner, no? So that what happens then? Then the anger dwells. I think there is a very nice Dhammapada verse. Let me see. Yeah. If you think in this manner, he abused me, he beat me, he worsted me, he robbed me. Hate never is allayed in men that cherish such like enmity. So what are you doing here? You are dwelling the anger. You are continuing unwise consideration. He abused me, he beat me, he worsted me, he robbed me. Hate surely is allayed in men who cherish no such enmity. For enmity by enmity is never in this world allayed. It is allayed by amity. That is an ancient principle. That means if you want to get rid of hatred, anger, you have to practice the opposite. You have to practice loving kindness. You have to think of the good qualities of the person. One thing is you can, okay, now if you are harboring angry thoughts, you can practice thoughts of loving kindness towards them. Or else what you can do is then you can think of, you can break down what happened. This is the air, this sound, in this simile, this example we got, you can break it down. Eye, sound, eye consciousness, likewise the conditional phenomena, you can focus on that. Or else you can do, so all these things are with regard to what? Replacing unwise consideration with wise consideration. Then the other thing is you can get rid of the sign itself, the trigger. So once you are scolded, it is an instance. But if you keep thinking about that, all day long you are being scolded by that person. Each time you are reminded, you get hurt. See, so you may experience in some instances, if you recall things good or bad that have happened years back, still you have the same experience. You can get angry now thinking of a thing that happened last year. That person did me wrong in this manner. Likewise, then anger arises. So if things happen like that, you just forget it. Just forget it. Buddha gave a nice simile. Buddha said it is like, in the Vitakka Sankhana Sutta, you come across this simile. Buddha said, just as a person would look away when he sees something that he doesn't want to see, something unsightly, something that makes him unhappy, something that brings him sorrow. If he doesn't want to see that, what you do? Inadvertently we do that, no? We look away. It just happens. Likewise, Buddha said, if such thoughts of anger or any other defilement for that matter, if that thoughts come to your mind, look away. Don't ponder upon those thoughts. Don't pursue those thoughts. So don't think of that person, that incident. That is one way to get rid of. And also you can contemplate upon the danger of harboring thoughts, right? Angry thoughts, or greed, or any other defilement for that matter. Because Buddha said, karma is created based on three things: greed, anger, and delusion. And Buddha said, if there is karma accrued based on greed or anger or delusion, definitely that karma will bring about rebirth, in the four bad destinations, in the place of misery. You will never be reborn among the devas, brahmas, or humans because of bad karma. That is in the Karma Nidana Sutta, the origins of karma. A beautiful sutta. There Buddha definitively states that if there is a state of greed, anger, or delusion in your mind, the karma accrued at that moment will definitely bring about rebirth in the four bad destinations. If it is non-greed, non-anger, and non-delusion, that will create karma, that will bring about birth in the heavenly worlds, in the human world, and of course the Brahma worlds. So likewise, you can think of the danger of harboring thoughts of anger. And then again, anger will subside in you. So that is other way you can go about it. So in this manner, what you are doing is basically you are replacing unwise consideration with wise consideration, or you are just avoiding the sign, the trigger that causes anger. In most cases, you might not be able to avoid the trigger. Okay, in some situations, you have to be with that person, maybe work with that person. So you have to always have wise consideration. Because people, most of the people, you should have compassion, sympathy for them, because they have not heard the teachings of the Buddha like you. So you don't know, they don't know the consequences. They don't believe in the karma, the consequences of their bad actions. So they will live a life that they have total disregard for other people's thoughts, their feelings, because they lack humane qualities. But still every person have good in them. So you should be skilled to focus on the good of a person. Whenever Sariputta Sayadaw, I think in Dutiyāgātipatavini Sutta, I think he said, you can get rid of anger. How? By focusing on the good things of the person. Maybe a person his verbal actions, his actions by body and speech are bad, but from time to time he might meditate. So that is the good in that person. Maybe his verbal actions are bad, but his bodily actions are pure. So focus on that. Maybe his bodily actions are evil, but his verbal actions are good. He speaks good words. So likewise, you have to focus on the good of that person. Then again, that will help you to get rid of the anger. So because we have our nature of the mind is there's a fault find in nature. if you have that tendency in your mind, and if that becomes a habit of yours, you will always see wrong in others. When you see the worst in people, in turn, you are the one who gets hurt. Your mind will get polluted. So if you want to protect your mind, purify your mind, always try to see the good in others, because as humans, we all have good qualities. So you should try to focus on it and get rid of our fault-finding nature in our mind, because that is a defilement. So in this way, loving kindness, if we see the danger of harboring anger, then we can get rid of anger. And in another sutta, Buddha pointed out in this manner, like, because 7 things gratifying and helpful to an enemy before one who is angry, whether a woman or a man. What are the 7? So if you are harboring anger against another sincere person, there is an enemy of yours, and you have hate toward that person. And because of that, you are going to lose, and the enemy is going to win in 7 ways. If you harbor anger against a person, an enemy of yours, or any person for that matter, then you are the one who's going to lose, not your enemy. So what are the 7 ways? Buddha said, here because an enemy wishes thus for this enemy. He wishes his enemy, let him be ugly. He doesn't like to see him dressed up nicely, smiling, happy. So he would like to rather see him ugly. So like he's jealous and there is anger there. Why is that? No enemy relishes an enemy's beauty. Now when this person is angry, a prey to his anger, that means he has become the prey to his own anger, ruled by anger, be he ever so well bathed and well anointed, with hair and beard trimmed and clothed in white, yet he is ugly to his being, a prey to anger. This is the first thing gratifying and helpful to an enemy that befalls one who is angry, whether a woman or man. So it doesn't matter how well you are going to dress up, whatever makeup you might wear, the best clothes, the suits you might wear, you won't look good. Have you seen yourself when you're angry? Huh? In the mirror? Or have someone pointed that out to you? Doesn't look good. That's it. So if you are harboring anger throughout, then you lose your pleasing nature. You will not look good. People will not love to be with you because you are a person who is always angry. So because when you harbor anger towards others, say enemy, then the enemy will benefit because you don't look nice. So that's the idea here. So that is why Buddha said you will be losing. You want your enemy to be ugly because you don't like him or her to be beautiful. But in return, the karma, see, that is what we call ditta dhamma vedini. Karma that bears fruit in this life. Here and now you will suffer because of that. You will not look pleasing. So the next thing is, also an enemy wishes thus for his enemy, let him lie in pain. Why is that? That means let him lie in pain. Lie here means to sleep. He doesn't like him to have a good night's sleep. He despises that person that much, he doesn't want him to have a good night's sleep. Why is that? No enemy relishes an enemy's lying in comfort. Now when this person is angry, a prey to anger, ruled by anger, for all he may lie on a couch spread with rugs, blankets, and counterpanes with a deerskin cover, a canopy and red cushions for the head and feet, yet he lies only in pain through his being, a prey to anger. This is the second thing that is gratifying to an enemy that befalls one who is angry. That means you might have the best comforting seats, the beds to lie in. But if you have thoughts of anger, others, you can't sleep well. Haven't you experienced that in your life? If you go to bed harboring thoughts of anger, if you have quarreled throughout the day with the person, if you had some dispute with the person and you are still reminded and you harbor anger, hatred toward that person, you can't have a good night's sleep. Sleep will not be comforting. So you don't want that person to sleep well, but in return, you are the one who's going to lose a good night's sleep. That is the second consequence, says the Buddha. Third is also an enemy wishes this of the enemy. Let him have no prosperity. He doesn't like to see that person prosper. But what happens is when a person, Buddha says, has been overcome by anger, hatred, then that person don't know what is good and bad. He can't make the right decision in life. So in his life, he made the wrong decision thinking this is the right decision. Be it a business matter, household matter, or whatever, he is inclined, prone to make the wrong decision, take the wrong decision, and he is going to suffer and he will not prosper in life. See how detrimental the anger is, how it affects your life in such a bad way, in so many various and means. If Buddha didn't taught us these things, we wouldn't find it out on ourselves. We don't know these things. But Buddha clearly shows, like if you are going to harbor anger towards your enemies, this is what you are going to happen. You are going to suffer. And in your life, you will not prosper, said the Buddha. And the next thing Buddha points out is, also when enemy wishes thus for his enemy, let him not be rich. So he doesn't want that person to be rich. So why is that? No enemy relishes an enemy is having riches. So if he grows in wealth and property, he acquires more wealth and property, then the enemy, you are not happy if to see your enemy grow in life in that way. So then what would you do? You will try to harm that person by body, speech and mind. You might do things that you regret, things that is against the law even, to harm his wealth and property. And in return, what happens? This is what Buddha says. Now, when a person is angry or prey to anger, should he have riches gained by endeavor, built up by strength of his arm, earned by sweat, lawful and lawfully acquired, yet the king's treasury gathers in fines through his being a prey to anger. That means that person's things will be taken by the king. That means under the present day circumstances, you will be fined or punished in some manner. You will either fall in jail. Because people kill, people steal, people harm the properties of others. Why? Because of anger. We see this happening in life. So then what happens? You lose all your wealth and property. And also you are distant from your loved ones. Once you are in jail, what? Then you lose everything. In a split second, your life can change. Because I have gone to, say, give Dhamma talks in the jail, and I have come across very young people who now regret what they have done. For instance, they have gotten angry and killed a person. That's what happens. These, because our defilements, we call they are latent. That means they are always there in the background. When the time is right, when the circumstances present themselves, they surface. And if you are not mindful, then they overwhelm you. Then you are overrun by that defilement. Then what happens? You act upon that. And instantly you might kill a person. You might destroy, you might like you can set person's business on fire, that premises on fire. People do these things and they go to jail for years. So there are numerous of cases that I have come across. Now they suffer, but it's too late and they're in jail. So in this way, so you will lose your riches if you are angry towards your enemies. Then the next thing Buddha says, also an enemy says, thus for his enemy, let him not be famous. So he doesn't want that person to be famous. Why is that? No enemy resists an enemy is having fame. Now when a person is angry or prey to anger, ruled by anger, what fame he may have acquired by diligence, he loses through his being a prey to anger. So then you lose your fame. Why? Because of the things you do. Your actions gets defiled because of anger. Your speech becomes defiled because of your anger. Your thoughts, intentions become defiled because of your anger. Then such a person will he gain fame and repute? No. The people of the society will not want to associate with that person. Whatever fame and fortune he might have, he will lose all that. Why? Because of harboring anger toward another person. So even towards enemy, you should have such compassion, just as a mother would have for her only child. That is the only way we can get rid of anger. Because Buddha says, no, if you are able to get rid of anger, I make the vow, I promise that you will become a non-returner or arahant. So that is the definitive statement of the Buddha. So anger is something we should all try to get rid of by contemplating on these are the disadvantages, dangers of harboring anger. Also an enemy wishes this of his enemy. Let him have no friends. Why is that? No enemy resists an enemy having friends. Now when this person is angry, prey to and ruled by anger, the friends he may have, his companions, relatives and king will keep away from him who is being a prey to anger. So you lose your own friends because no one wants to associate with the person who gets angry. You know, and people become grumpy, when it becomes a habit. Just by a small thing you get angry. And no one wants to be around such people. So in turn, though you wish your enemy to lose friends, you are the one who is losing friends. So you should not get angry. You should not harbor thoughts of anger for others as well. So next thing Buddha points out is, also an enemy wishes thus for his enemy. Let him, on the dissolution of the body after death, reappear in he would like him to be born in the bad destination. But what happens? That person, because he harbored anger, hatred toward the enemy, he is having defiled thoughts. And he is creating bad karma that will bring about birth in the 4 planes of misery. So he will be losing. Likewise, these are the manifold disadvantages, the dangers, the downside of harboring anger. So today, those are certain things that I wanted to discuss. And today's actually the sutta is on loving kindness itself, how to practice loving kindness. So this is the Anuruddha Sutta found in Majjhima Nikaya. Middle discourses, Sunyata Vagga. So in this sutta, we can learn how to practice loving kindness, the proper way of practicing loving kindness. So this is how the sutta begins. Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living in Savatthi. Okay, in the Jetavana, Anathapindika's park. So there was a carpenter by the name Panchangika. So this carpenter was the king's carpenter, chief carpenter of the king. So he was very busy because he is of course the king's chief carpenter. He doesn't have leisure time, but one day he figured, okay, I have to somehow find time to give alms for the Sangha. Because he was a disciple who had gone for retreat to the Buddha and Dhamma Sangha, he wanted to get some monks to his house and offer dana, alms. So he sent a messenger to Venerable Anuruddha, Bhante Anuruddha, and the messenger, this is a message he sent, okay, go tell Venerable Anuruddha that I would like to offer dana for Sangha, himself and 3 other monks. So please ask them to come to my house tomorrow, but please also ask them that they come early morning because I am a busy person. I have so many tasks to attend, so it would be nice if they could, Venerable Anuruddha and the other monks could come to my home early in the morning. So this was the message that was sent through the messenger. So the messenger went to Venerable Arahant Anuruddha paid his respect, venerated the Bhante and said, Bhante, Venerable Sir, the carpenter Panchangika would like you to come to his house tomorrow for alms together with yourself and 3 other monks, so he could offer alms the morning dana, and also he would like you to come a bit early because he is rather busy and he has other tasks to attend. So out of compassion, being in silence, silence is considered acceptance those days. Even in the case of the Buddha, when such requests are made of the Buddha, if Buddha remains silent, that means acceptance. So Venerable Arahant Anuruddha accepted the invitation. So next day, early morning, with 3 other monks, Arahant Anuruddha arrived at the carpenter's house. So then the carpenter asked certain questions on loving kindness meditation. So that's how the sutta is. So we got the opportunity because of those questions to learn certain aspects, certain things that we would never have learned otherwise about loving kindness. So this is what he says. Here, Venerable Sir, elder bhikkhus, that is senior monks, come to me and say, householder, develop the immeasurable deliverance of mind. And some elders, some senior monks say, householder, develop the exalted deliverance of mind. So here he is hearing 2 different things from senior monks. Some monks say, develop immeasurable deliverance of mind. Appamana cheto vimutti, we say in Pali. Some say, householder, develop immeasurable deliverance of mind. While some senior monks have told me, householder, develop mahangata cheto vimukti. That is what exalted deliverance of the mind. 2 things, immeasurable deliverance of mind and exalted deliverance of the mind. So this carpenter is now at a loss. He doesn't understand what to do. So he asked the question, Venerable Sir, I don't understand. This is the same. Is this the same thing expressed in 2 ways, or are these things 2 totally different things in different names? Or is it the same thing expressed in 2 different names? So that's what he wanted to know. So Venerable Anuruddha Bhante says, what do you think? Are they the same or 2 different things? So then he says, Venerable Sir, I think the immeasurable deliverance of mind and the exalted deliverance of mind, these states are one in meaning and different only in name. So he thought they are both the same, but they have different names. That was his opinion of the thing. Whose opinion? The carpenter's opinion. But then Venerable Anuruddha corrects him. He says, householder, the immeasurable deliverance of mind and the exalted deliverance of mind, these states are different in meaning and different in name. And it should be understood as follows. And he teaches the difference between appamana cheto vimutti, immeasurable deliverance of mind, and mahadgata cheto vimutti, that is exalted deliverance of the mind. So what householder is the immeasurable deliverance of mind? Here, a bhikkhu abides pervading 1 quarter with the mind imbued with loving kindness. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above, below, around and everywhere, and to all as to himself. As he abides pervading the all-encompassing world with the mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill. So immeasurable deliverance of the mind is you practice loving kindness in the 10 directions. That is what he mentioned as the quarters. So your first direction, one direction is the north. Then there is south, east, west. Then there are other 4 intermediate directions. Northeast, southeast, northwest and southwest. So 8 direction all in all, then above and below 10 direction. So you should spread, if you are spreading loving kindness, boundless, unconditional, without hatred, without ill will, to all beings in this world, in these 10 directions, then what is that called? What's the term there?
Apamanan Cheto Vimukti.
What is that? Immeasurable deliverance of mind.
Mind.
Immeasurable, like that means there is, you can't say it is not finite, it's infinite, because when you think of the north directions, there is no end, it's a direction. So as long as it goes. So in this way, you have to, if you are practicing loving kindness, spread into these 10 directions, that is called Apamana Cheto Vimukti, immeasurable deliverance of mind. But not only loving kindness. Then here, Venerable Bhante Anuruddha says, that is loving kindness. Then in the same way you practice in the 10 directions. What? Compassion. Because this is deliverance of the mind. The other is you practice compassion. Third is you practice altruistic joy, mudita. So what is mudita? What is compassion first? What is compassion? What does it mean to have compassion? Huh?
We rejoice in other people's happiness, man.
No, compassion. Karuna.
Oh, karuna. we feel when other people suffer, we being compassionate with them. We feel their suffering and they're happy.
Anyone else?
Bhante, it's like genuine caring, right?
Caring for others.
Right, like caring, like normally, like people, they care about others as long as, you know, they benefit from them. Like they care about them for their own sake, right? So this is like beyond that.
Yeah, okay, I'll give the Buddha's
Right.
definition. This is how Buddha said. Buddha said, Paradukke hadaya kampatiti karuna. That means when you get upset, if you feel shocked, when you see other people suffer, okay? You are shocked at the other people suffering. You feel for them, you sympathize with them. Then that's compassion. You get upset, you get sad, you feel for them. Then if you have those feelings, that's a good thing. That's a wholesome state. That is what? Compassion. That's something our teacher have in abundance. Whatever happens in this world, be it overseas in Sri Lanka, like sometimes he can't even sleep. He thinks of that. What's happening to people, the pandemic, and whatever things, say if it's a flood in Sri Lanka, a natural calamity, whatever. And there are days we know that he have told us that he has lost sleep because of that. Because why? Karuna, compassion. What can I do for these people to save them from this? Likewise, that is compassion. Paradukti hadayam kampatiti karuna. So if you feel sad when others are in trouble, compassion. Then what? Then altruistic joy. What is altruistic joy?
You are wishing for others to have like even higher, better things than you, like maybe they have better wealth and maybe they have better happiness and things like that.
Anyone else? That's close. Okay, so that's the answer. There is like you are appreciative of others' gains. You love to see people prosper. You love to see people improve in life. You see them gain wealth and property. You don't feel jealous. Jealousy is the opposite state of altruistic joy. You become envious then. But here, altruistic joy, you are appreciative of other person's happiness. You want people to be well and happy. If you are such a person, then that means what? You have mudita. And the nature of mudita is, if you wish for a person to develop in certain qualities, it can be shraddha, It can be practicing the Buddha, it can be virtue, it can be Dhamma knowledge, it can be generosity, it can be wisdom. If you want other person to develop in this, if you wholeheartedly wish for a person to develop in these qualities, that quality helps you to develop this quality. That's the nature of mudita. If you wish for the well-being and happiness of others, be it spiritual or something that is worldly, you will in turn benefit. So say you are not good at meditation. You find it difficult to meditate. But you see a person meditating well. And if you can be happy without being jealous, that will one day help you to develop meditation. That's how it works. So never be jealous. Because jealousy is something that can easily come up in your mind. Even without knowing, jealousy can harm your actions. That is something you have to look out for, jealousy. Because people are naturally envious. So in this manner, you have to practice mudita also in the 10 directions. Because this is apamana cheto vimukti, deliverance of the mind. Then you have to practice what? Equanimity in the 10 directions as well. Equanimity, you feel indifferent against the 8 worldly conditions. Atalodham, 8 worldly conditions, you feel indifferent. You are not affected by them. You are not overrun by them. So if you are capable of that, that is what we call equanimity. So these are all you should practice just as loving kindness in the 10 directions. If you do so, it's apamana cheto vimukti. So are you familiar with the meditation for loving kindness? I know you do that. What about compassion? Do you know the stanzas for that? Huh? It's the same. The structure is the same as for loving kindness. You have to spread loving kindness. Likewise, compassion. So shall I tell you the stanzas if you want to write them down, or I'll just tell you.
Yes.
So with compassion, karuna, this is how you practice. Yeah, compassion is, you say, so because I am not familiar with this in English, because whatever that is close to your heart, you have to practice meditation in that. Because my mother tongue is Sinhala, I practice in Sinhala. So in your case, if it is English, then you have to practice meditation also in English. That's up to you to decide which way to go, okay? So with regard to compassion, this is how you have to practice thing. May I be free from bodily afflictions. Okay? So we say kāyika pīdā natthikkema. Bodily afflictions. Okay? Then may I be free from mental afflictions. May I be healthy physically. May I be healthy physically, then physical way. May I be healthy physically. May I be healthy mentally. May I be healthy physically. May I be healthy mentally. And may I live happily. So the same you have to practice for each of the directions. Like which is the same for the others. So apply the same pattern as we discussed in the metta meditation. Okay. May I be free from bodily afflictions. May I be free from mental afflictions. May I be healthy physically. May I be healthy mentally. And may I live happy. So these are the stanzas.
Swaminivasa, can you tell in Pali too, please?
Pali, I don't remember the Pali for this. Sinhala I can say though, may කායික පීඩනත් එක්කම මානසික පීඩනත් එක්කම කායික සුවයෙන් සුවපත් වෙන්න මානසික සුවයෙන් සුවපත් වෙන්න සුවසේ ජීවත් වෙන්න. That's in Sinhalese. Pali I don't remember. So may I be free from bodily afflictions, may I be free from mental afflictions, may I be healthy physically, May I be healthy mentally and may I live happy. So for that is for compassion. With regard to mudita, this is how you should contemplate, you should practice mudita. May I growing lifespan. May I growing lifespan. May I growing power. May I growing beauty. May I growing pleasure. May I growing fame. May I growing praise. And may I growing wisdom. So then you can say, as I wish for me, may everyone in this house. That is when you practice Mahatgar Cheto between this time. Like may everyone in the north direction, okay? Then the south direction, east, west, and the intermediate directions. You have to wish the same. You wish for them to grow in lifespan, power, beauty, pleasure, fame, praise, and wisdom. That is mudita. Then with regard to equanimity meditation, this is how you have to contemplate, okay? You should be unmoved by the 8 worldly conditions. That's the basis, okay? So it means this is how you have to do. May I not be elated by gain. May I not be grieved by loss. May I not be elated by gain. May I not be grieved by loss. May I not be elated by praise. May I not be grieved by blame. May I not be elated by fame. May I not be grieved by disrepute. So in each case, we are discussing of the opposite. May I not be elated by fame. May I not be grieved by disrepute. May I not be elated by bodily pleasure. May I not be grieved by bodily displeasure. May I not be elated by bodily pleasure. May I not be grieved by bodily displeasure. May I not be elated by mental pleasures. May I not be grieved by mental displeasures. And may I be peaceful. So in this way, with regard to the 8 worldly conditions which come and go in life, you remain unmoved, unaffected, steadfast. So that is what? Equanimity. So in this way, I hope you got all that down. So that is how you practice metta, karuna, mudita, and upekka. In kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity meditation. So deliverance here, what we call is immeasurable deliverance of mind means practicing these 4 meditations, contemplations in all 10 directions. That's deliverance of, immeasurable deliverance of the mind. Okay?
Swami Nwansa, what's the difference between metta and karuna? How do you say differently?
Answers?
Yeah, say difference between metta and karuna.
Loving kindness, so it's like not harboring anger, spreading thoughts of love boundlessly. And compassion is that you hope that people, like you see people suffer and you hope them to not suffer. Like we say, you may they not have physical suffering, mental suffering, physical and mental afflictions. May they live in peace. Why? Because you feel for it. Okay? That's the difference. So that is how we have to
stanzas for stanzas for metta.
That's may I be free from anger, may I be free from ill will, may I be free from jealousy, may I be free from mental suffering, may I be free from physical suffering, may I live in peace, may I live happily. Okay? That's all loving kindness. So then, householder, That's what we discuss is immeasurable deliverance of the mind. Then Venerable Ananda Bhante explains, and what household is the exalted deliverance of the mind. Mahadgata Cheto Vimukti. Here a bhikkhu abides revolved upon an area the size of the root of one tree. Okay, pervading it as exalted. This is called the exalted deliverance of mind. So what happens here is, like, say you are sitting under a tree, the monk is sitting under a tree. So first he thinks of the immediate area that's the closest to the vicinity of the tree, like closest area to the tree, and he spread loving kindness to that area. So he focuses only on that limited area. Okay, then he progressively increases the area. Then he focuses 2 trees. The area, the land that covers the area of 2 trees. Then he says, okay, 3 trees. He gradually increases the area. That's what's happening here. Then he says, may all beings in a village be free from anger, be free from ill will, be free from jealousy. Likewise, loving kindness, meditation. Then he focuses not to 1 village, but 2 or 3 villages. Yeah, say 2 or 3, then 2 or 3 villages in the same way. Then he would say he will focus on a whole kingdom. Okay, instead of the one 2 or 3 villages, he focuses on whole kingdom. Then instead of 1 kingdom, he focuses on 2 or 3 kingdoms. Then instead of 2 or 3 kingdoms, then he focuses on the whole world. So like that is in the sutta. They had kingdoms, villages. Now what do we have? We are meditating here in our house. So then you focus on your immediate vicinity, say like your town or your village. So then we focus on the province in your country, whether it's a county, I don't know, whatever that is there. So in this way, then you gradually, what happens is you progressively increases the area. So that's the principle there. Then you focus on all the countries, the whole world. And then we see all of the worlds, Devasa, Bhakma world, the hell worlds, all things. So that is how you have to practice with regard to what? Exalted deliverance of the mind. Not only loving kindness. In the same way you practice what? Compassion, karuna, mudita, altruistic joy, and upekha, equanimity. All 4 meditations you have to practice in that manner. Okay? So in the Mahadgata Cheto Vimukti, in this case, exalted deliverance of the mind, it is increasing the area progressively. With regard to the Apamana Cheto Vimukti, you practice in the directions. So that is the disparity, that is the difference, that is the distinction. You have to remember, okay? So next is, so is that clear? Any questions on that? You can ask if there are questions. Arjamali, how much time do you have? Time is always a problem every day.
We still have some time, Bhante.
How much is that?
Well, it's 9:46 p.m. for our time, Bhante. So we usually don't have much of a time, so.
Bhante, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Why do we wish people for a long life when life is extended at the end of life, where we're going to suffer because we're going to live longer and it's at the end? Why do we not wish for somebody's peaceful death?
Because human life is very invaluable. It's invaluable and it's very rare. And it is in this human life that a person can practice the Dhamma and he has the opportunity to acquire a lot of merit, and also he can practice the noble path and get rid of all of the suffering in the world. Because people are again and again born in the 4 bad destinations. And the birth in the human world, it's like not once in a blue moon, but it's a many years chance that a person gets to be born. It's so very rare. So if you were to even live one day, if you live it properly, the Buddha said, no, a person can live for 100 years without being virtuous, rather than living for 100 years without being virtuous. If one day being virtuous, that matters. That is going to bring about a lot of happiness and will be for you in this life and the next life and the samsaric journey. That is why we wish for people to live long, and also it is the nature of the people that no one wants to die. Okay? Like people, that is the nature of beings. So with regard to this, we wish long life so that they can acquire more merits, practice likewise. That is why even in the case, we bless you, the monks bless you to have long life. Likewise, we bless you after the program. So we bless you to have long life, beauty, comfort, happiness, power, esteem. Why? These are things people look for, and having those things help you to practice. It is conducive to the practice. If you are a person who is always sick, who does not have wealth, like these things help you. It's difficult for you to practice. They don't help. They are not comforting. That is why we wish for long life. Okay. Hey, is that clear?
Thank you. Yes, very. Thank you.
So,
Swaminathan, I have another question. Swaminathan, is it okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, Swaminathan, now when you say Cheto Vimukti, Metta Cheto Vimukti, is it the jhana state arising out of this metta meditation, or it just the pleasure you get and rest you, like Paviveka Sukha, that kind of Sukha?
Is like at that moment when you practice, the mind is devoid of the defilements to some extent. Then this, of course, you can develop to the jhana state. That is why it is kind of deliverance. Deliverance from that state of defiled state where you are practicing a wholesome state in the mind. So you can develop, of course, to jhana states. That's the idea. Okay? Deliverance of the mind. So we are now then that is clear, no? Apamana Cheto Vimukti and Mahagara Cheto Vimukti. Then the subject change. So not like then we are talking about a new thing here. Okay. There are household, Venerable Arahanta says, there are household, these 4 kinds of reappearance. Okay. What for? Reappearance, there are these 4 kinds of rebirth. Here someone abides resolved upon and pervading limited radiance. On the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears in the company of the gods of limited radiance. So say a person practice loving kindness. So for some, when they practice loving kindness, so you close your eyes and you contemplate upon the stanza, and what happens is your hindrances, when they subdue, for some they get a light, a radiance in that meditative state. So you are focusing still on the loving kindness stanzas, but there is some radiance, some light experienced by the mind. So for some it is limited. That is why it is called limited radiance. It is Pali's Parittaba. Okay, limited light radiance is there. So such a person, after death, he is born in the company of the gods of limited radiance. That's the name of the gods, that order of gods, Parittaba Devas. So they are born there. Why? Because when they are practicing this meditation, say loving kind meditation, when they are practicing, they experience very limited light. That was their mental state. So as a result, they were born among Devas with a limited radiance. Okay, this is said by Venerable Bhante Anuruddha. And then here someone abides resolved upon and pervading immeasurable radiance on the. So in some cases, some experience immeasurable light. That means that was limited. No, in his case, it's more powerful, the light he experienced in meditation. So this doesn't mean when you practice loving kindness or any other matter, any other meditation, that you should therefore focus on the light. Here the light is something of the background. Background in the sense, it is just there. You don't focus there. Like you have closed your eyes, then you are meditating. And when the hindrances subdue, because of that, there is a light that arises in the mind. So that is there, still you have to focus on the senses only. You don't focus on the light, you never do that. Okay? So you focus on the senses. So you experience the immeasurable light. Some experience immeasurable light. And as a result, they are born among the gods of immeasurable radiance. Another order of gods. Immeasurable, we say, Appamanava Devas. That is the name. And then there are then we discussed two type of beings. Okay. Then the third is here someone abides resolved upon and pervading defiled radiance. So that means when they practice the light they experience is impure. It's not a pure light. The light is impure. That is why it is called defiled radiance. And as a result, they are born among the gods. We say gods with defiled radiance. Sankirittava Devas. That's the name of those devas. Sankirittava. That means their light is not pure, impure radiance, defiled radiance. Then for some, when they practice loving kindness, they experience a very pure light, devoid of indefilements. So they are born among devas with pure radiance. Okay, that is what we call the gods of pure radiance. Is Appamana Subha Devas. Paritta Subha, Appamana Subha. Okay, so in this way, there are 4 types of devas. There's 4 types of rebirths, according to the mental state that prevails when practicing these 4 kinds of meditation. For some, what was the case? Some experience limited light, and as a result, they were born among gods of limited radiance, Parittaba Deva. Then some experience what?
Immeasurable radiance.
Okay. So they were born in turn where? Appamanava Devas. Appamanava Devas. And some when meditating, they experience a light that is
defiled.
Pure.
They were born among Devas with defiled radiance. Sankirittava Deva. Then there is what? Some experience pure light, very pure. And they were born among Devas with pure radiance, the gods of pure radiance. Parisuddhava. Sankirittava, Parisuddhava. Parittava, Appamanava, Sankirittava, Parisuddhava. Okay, those are the 4 rebirths they got accordingly. So,
It was Sarna Swaminathan. Are these, although they were, Tathagata says it is Deva, is it a Brahma worlds or those are heavens?
like to be born among Brahma worlds, you have to have jhana states. No? Here in the Sutta we find as Devas, right? So these are order of Devas. That's why you have like Divya Nikaya we say in Sinhala. So that's how you find in Suttas. Okay, Divya Nikaya, order of Devas. Among Devas is such state. Okay, that's how we are. So You can be born in the Brahma worlds, of course, if you are fortunate enough to develop to the jhanic states, any of these meditations. Or else that is how there you are born among these devas. So then there is an occasion, householder, when those deities assemble in one place. So these various devas, there are meetings. Even in the devas world, just like in the human world, there are from time to time meetings, gathering. So here say there is an occasion also when those deities assemble in one place. When they have assembled in one place, a difference in their color can be discerned, but no difference in their radiance. Then you come together in this, then you can see the difference. You can see the difference in the color, but not of the radiance. That means you can see whether it's a pure light emanating from that deva or whether it's an impure light. But you can't see the radiance. Why is that? And here he gives a simile. Ananta gives a simile. Just as if a man were to bring several oil lamps into a house or a room, okay, say the difference in the flames of the lamps might be discerned, but no difference in their radiance. Why? When all the lamps are in the same room, you can't discern which lamp has more light, because the whole of the room is lighted by the lamps. But you can discern whether the light is pure or impure. Is that clear? That is the simile there. So when these devas come together, some have pure light, some have impure light, some have limited radiance, some have radiance in abundance. So, but when they are together, you can discern the difference in the light, whether it's impure or pure, but you can't differentiate between the light, whether it's limited or unlimited. That can't be discerned. So, but there, it so happens after the meeting, what happens? They leave. But when they leave, you can discern. This deva has impure light and it is limited. This deva has pure light and it is unlimited. This deva's light is pure, but still it is limited. Likewise, the difference can be clearly discerned. And the simile given there is, what if you take those oil lamps out of the room, one by one, then you can clearly see that this one has more light. This has a pure light. This has more radiance or less radiance. That can be clearly identified. So this is how it is, okay? When this was said, the Venerable Sabya Kachan, the other monk, the 3 monks went with the Venerable Andudabantinu. So Sabya Kachan is one among the other 2, okay? He says, okay, that before that there's something else. So, they discuss another aspect, like the quality of the devas. Venerable Amruddhabante says of the quality of the devas, that is, it does not occur to those deities. This life of ours is permanent, everlasting, or eternal. Yet wherever those deities settle down, there they find the life. So this is the English translation, or it is a bit wrong. So what it says is this, that these devas, they don't feel that the mansion they dwell in, they don't feel that it is permanent, this is ours. They don't cling to it, just like we do to our houses. They don't feel that way. Like they are ready to leave. And the simile given here is, just as when flies are being carried aloft on a carrying pole or on a basket, it does not occur to them, to the flies. This life of ours is, that means they are ready to leave that place. Don't think of flies. They sit on one place, they land on one place, then they leave to another place. They don't think we have to be here. That is why, just like a carrying pole on a basket, when the carrying pole is carried from one place to other, the flies go with that pole, the basket. So they don't remain in one place. Just like the devas, they are happy to leave. Because there are devas which we call Bhumatu devas, close to the earth. They live in trees, they live by the rivers, and live among rocks. So these places still they are ready to live. With the lower realms we can't say that is so, but with the devas in higher worlds, that is the state. That means they don't consider their mentions. Because I think in the lower earthly worlds, we can't think they are into the family. But in the higher realms of the devas, they are not attached to their mentions by any means. So they are always ready to give up them. That is the idea that bondage is not there. So that is why if you want to be born in the devas, you have to practice that quality. If you are already bonded to your possessions, both animate and inanimate, then that is a disqualification to be born among the devas. Okay, keep that in mind. So when this was said, the venerable Sabya Kaccayana, another monk that had gone with the Venerable Arahant Anuruddha, said, "Good Venerable Anuruddha, yet I have something further to ask." So he has his own question. So up to now, Venerable Anuruddha Bhante was answering the questions of the layman. Now this monk asks question. Are all those radiant ones deities of limited radiance, or are some of them deities of immeasurable radiance? So here again he asks the question, among devas, are there devas with limited radiance and unlimited radiance? So then the answer given by Venerable Anuruddha is, by reason of the factor that what we discussed before, Fen Kaccayana, Sabya Kaccayana, some are deities of limited radiance and some deities of unlimited radiance. Then the monk again questions, what is the cause and reason why among these deities that have appeared in a single order, they are born in the same Deva Nikaya, single order of gods, some are deities of limited radiance while others are deities of immeasurable radiance. The reason for some getting a limited radiance and some getting immeasurable radiance, what is the cause there? Okay. So as to that, Fen Kaccayana, I shall ask you a question in return. Answer it as you choose. What do you think, Fen Kaccayana, Sabya Kaccayana? When one bhikkhu abides resolved upon an area the size of the root of one tree, pervading it as exalted, and another bhikkhu abides resolved upon the area of the size of the root of 2 or 3 trees, pervading it as exalted, which of these types of mental development is more exalted? Say one monk would focus on one tree and the surrounding area, whereas the other monk would focus on 2 or 3 trees. So who is doing better there? The one practicing loving kindness, focused on 2 or 3. And compare that monk who is practicing focused on 2 or 3 trees to one practicing focused on the village. Who is practicing more? One who is focusing on the village. And compare the person practicing on the village to a person practicing to the area of 2 or 3 villages. Who is practicing loving kindness more, unlimitedly, that person. And compare him to the person who is practicing, focusing on the whole kingdom. Then he is more unlimited in that sense. So in the same way, their radiance is also going to differ. Some have more radiance, some have limited radiance. So what is the deciding factor there? The focus. The focus, the area to which they spend loving kindness. So that is based on which contemplation? Mahatgata Cheto Vimukti. No? Immeasurable deliverance of the mind. It is in that meditation that you practice, progressively increasing the area. And according to the area of focus, your radiance will be decided, whether it's going to be limited or unlimited. So when you practice, make sure it is unlimited. Okay? That is why we gradually increase according to Sutta up to the whole world. Okay. So then the monk says, okay, good Venerable Anuruddha, yet I have something further to ask. Are all those radiant ones deities of defiled radiance, or are some of them deities of pure radiance? So ask among these devas, do all of them have pure radiance, or are there devas who have impure radiance, defiled radiance as well? So Venerable Anuruddha, when asking this way, he asks what is the cause or reason for this. And again he says, I shall give simile. As to that Fen Sabya Kaccayana, I shall give simile. For some wise men here understand the meaning of statement by means of a simile also. Suppose an oil lamp is burning with impure oil and impure wick. Because of the impurity of its oil and its wick, it burns dimly. Because the light is dim, that means the light is impure. So to here a bhikkhu abides souls upon and pervading a defiled radiance. His bodily inertia has no, this is the now when he is meditating, he is not in a good state of mind. He finds the meditation difficult. Why? Because of these reasons. His bodily inertia, that is the physical exhaustion of that person. Okay, his bodily inertia has not fully subsided, so he has some physical exhaustion there. So normally, when you are well concentrated, you experience passaddhi, no? Lightness of the body. When you are able to easily focus on the meditative object. So this person, he doesn't have that. He can't do so. His bodily inertia therefore has not fully subsided. His sloth and torpor. What is sloth and torpor? Lazy and lethargic state of the body and mind. So that is there. Have not been fully eliminated. His restlessness and remorse have not been fully removed. So there is restlessness and remorse as well. Because of this, he meditates as it were dimly. So the meditation is not that successful. So therefore, it is impure. That meditative state, the state of the mind is impure. And they are born with devas, among devas with the impure radiance. So they wouldn't have a pure radiance. Is that clear? So this is all words. Now see, it is different for each person. Each person's experience is different. Because Buddha said, no, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, they are past karma. So our mind is past karma. So for each of us, it is going to be different, our path. Some find meditation easy, for some it is difficult. But still you have to meditate. Still you have to practice the path. That is how it is. So, but by knowing these things, you can have patience. Okay, there are such people in this world. So I fall to this category. So what to do? But I have to believe in the teachings and keep on practicing. Then surely you can still progress. So in this case, so that is why if your meditative state is impure, then you are born with the impure radiance. That means when you experience, if you experience physical exhaustion when meditating, if there is a lazy and lethargic state of the mind, if there is regret and remorse, if there is doubt, likewise. And then the other simile is, suppose an oil lamp is burning with pure oil and pure wick. So in this case, the wick is pure. The oil is pure and the wick is pure. Then the light is also going to be a pure light. Likewise, for some, when they meditate, his bodily inertia has fully subsided. His sloth and torpor have been fully eliminated. His restlessness and remorse have been fully removed. Because of this, he meditates as it were brightly. So he experienced a very good meditative state. Maybe even jhana states he can experience. So for that person, if he is born among the devas, he would have a bright light because of practicing meditation in that manner. So he will not have a defiled radiance, he will have a very pure radiance. I think that's clear, no? According to the meditative state you experience. It's different from each person. When this was said, the Venerable Sabhiya Kachana said to the Venerable Anuruddha, good Venerable Anuruddha, it's very good. And he says, Anuruddha does not say, when you say Anuruddha Bhakti, you don't say, thus have I heard. You don't say, this is how I have heard. This is how we hear in the suttas now, because they are first said by the Buddha. But in this case, he says, you don't say, thus have I heard, or it should be thus. Rather, the Venerable Anuruddha says, these gods are thus. This is how these gods are. Those gods are in this way, like you state it out, say it straight out, straightforward. So it is very definitive, your statement. So it occurs to me, Venerable Sir, that the Venerable Anuruddha certainly has previously associated with those deities. and talk with them and have conversations with them. Surely, then, Venerable Naruto Bhante, you must have talked with the Devas, your experience, you have heard from them. That is why you are so sure of your words. So then Bhante says the nature of the Arahant, he says, certainly, Venerable Sabhya, now that you asked me directly, I will tell you that I do talk with the Devas. I have talked with them. So that is the nature of the Arahant. They don't express their abilities, their skills. See in the suttas, no? They don't show off. They don't say, I am an Arahant, I am so and so. I have these abilities, these skills. They are not show offs. That's a quality. So they say, because you now ask me directly, I will tell. He was actually, Anuruddha Bhante was the foremost among Buddha's deities with the skill to communicate with the Devas. Divine eye and divine ear. What is divine eye and divine ear? Is the ability to communicate with both humans and Devas near and far. You can hear and see both of them. Both you have that both those skills. So Anuruddha Bhante was the Arahant Anuruddha was the foremost among all the monks. So he speaks with the Devas and he knows their nature. So these are things he actually knew by hand. First person. On his own, he had this experience. That's why he said straight away, this is how and this is how not. When this was said, the Venerable Sabhya Kaccana said to the carpenter Panchamrita, it is a gain for you, householder. It is a gain for you that you have abandoned your state of doubt and have the opportunity to hear this discourse from the Dhamma. It is a good thing that you have got the chance to abandon your doubts by listening to this Dhamma discussion, Dhamma talk by Venerable Anuruddha Bhante, and also in our case, we learn new things through the monks as well. Because these are things only Anuruddha Sainasi, Venerable Anuruddha, had the experience for himself because he had to talk to the Deva. Just like Arahant Moggallana, he went to the deities world and talked and came and told these things. So we have Vimanavatthu and also Pretavattu even. So likewise, Mr. Bhante Anuruddha also had close associations with the deities. So in this way, that's the Anuruddha Sutta. So I hope like you learn something from that sutta. And that this inspires you to practice both loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity meditation. Because these are the things, the gifts we get, our endowment from the Buddha. So see, like you think, I'm going to practice loving kindness in the morning, compassion after lunch. And in the afternoon, you can practice mudita. Before you go to bed, you can practice upekkha. See how much merit you can acquire. You will acquire more merit than practicing, like say, you acquire more merit than practicing loving kindness with compassion, more by equanimity, more by altruistic journey, and even more with equanimity, likewise. Progressively higher merits. And there is a sutta, Buddha says, monks, a person can do many meritorious deeds by body, speech, and mind. Like you can do many meritorious deeds, but anything doesn't even come close to the merits that you can acquire by practicing loving kindness. Like it's all other merits are like 1/16 of the merits you can acquire from practicing loving kindness. That's the use. And he said, Buddha said, just as the moon overshines all the stars. Likewise, the merits you can acquire from practicing loving kindness surpasses all other merits you can acquire from many other means, any meritorious act. So I think you should all try to practice these 4 meditations, Metta, Karuna, Metta, Upekkha. That will definitely help you to develop awesome qualities, acquire a lot of merits, powerful merits, and also to realize the Dhamma, because you are dispelling defilements by doing so. Okay, so that's it for today. The sutta. Do you have any questions that you want to pose?
Yes, Bhante. Can I ask Bhante about that? Bhante, you mentioned about the light that that appear when we are in deep concentration. And Bhante said the light comes from the back. Is that what Bhante says?
The background.
The light comes from the background, Bhante?
Background means to say? Like when you are, don't practice, it is something a person may experience or may not experience. It is not, it's regard to everyone. Okay? Each person is different. Here what it says is when you practice loving kindness, you close your eyes now. And when you focus, when you get focus, it is something you experience in your mind. It's not in your, like say, physical environment, in your immediate environment. Okay? It is a state of the mind that you experience. Now, the next time you meditate, don't look for that. That's not the point here. Some experience that, some don't. Okay? That's his nature. Each person is different. So if you are going, each time you are going to meditate, if you are going to right, then you lose your way. So always focus on the stanzas. Whatever meditation you do, you always choose the meditative object. No? Be it your breath, in breath and out breath. Still your focus throughout that meditation is going to be your breath, nothing else. It shouldn't be anything. Once it wavers from that object in your meditative state, it falls down, like it degrades, it declines. And then you can't progress. And also in meditation, remember, you don't check your states, okay? How I am doing. Because there's no self now. It's non-self. All you have to do is you have to create the supporting condition. And in meditation, the supporting condition means you have stopped all other work. You are seated alone, possibly in a secluded place, and you are sitting there ready, and you are focusing on one meditative object. That's all. Those are the supporting conditions, and you keep on concentrating upon those stanzas, then you improve in meditation. Each time you are going to check, how am I doing? How am I doing? That is like you lose the point of the meditative object. You are focusing on something else. Why non-self is that? You just do what you have to do. Keep it simple. Focus on the meditating stanza. That's all. So anyone else?
Bhante, can I ask you one more question? It's about the bodily inertia. Bhante, you talk about that. Is that because when we are tired, is that what it meant by bodily inertia is low?
Here, like more than the tiredness you might have beforehand the practice, this is tiredness, like is a sense, say when you can't focus, keep your focus, then the lightness, the passaddhi you experience in meditation, the physical light, because when you the more you focus on the meditation, your whole body relaxes, and there is the sense of relaxation, and the body becomes light. That is called passaddhi. And the first person, if he find it difficult to focus on the meditative object, then for him you feel the knee aches, the back aches, all that. If the meditation is going on well, then you don't feel these pains. Then the physical aspect of the meditation becomes very comforting. That's the idea.
Yes, thank you, Bhante.
Why they are called Brahma Virana? So can you explain it, Swaminathan?
Brahmas, they always tell in this Virana means these states. Because you are born in the Brahma world by practicing jhanas, in most cases, they have these qualities now inherent in Brahmas. Always Brahmas deal with Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekka. That is the nature. That is why they call Brahma Vihara. So only the two of you have mics. What about others?
Swaminathan, I have another question, Swaminathan.
Yes.
In Attavimokha Sutta, the third one, Subhanteva Adimuchyati. It says the third Vimokha, Subhanteva Adimuchyati. Yeah. Is it the same as this Metta Ceto Vimukti?
In Pali, the terms with regard to each sutta, its application is rather different. Like Subhanteva Adimutta means the Buddhas, they consider certain things as things very big, like Subha. Subha means things that are very good, things that should be cultivated, and things that we pursue. But in our case, we pursue sensual pleasures and things that actually are not good for us. In the case of the Buddhas, what they consider to be Subha is like contemplating on the impermanence, the 4 elements, the 5 aggregates. Likewise, these things, Buddhas consider them as to be Subha. And to practice the Noble Eightfold Path, they are good things that you have to do. So when you practice these good things, what happens? Adimutta. Deliverance. We achieve deliverance. That is why Subhante Adimutta. With regard to Ashtavimamsa, that is how you have to understand. For each sutta, the 5 terms, the applications can be different. Okay? And also similarities as well. Okay. Because Adimutta means it's the same, deliverance.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Bhante, we also have a question.
Swaminathan, a clarification, Swaminathan. Swaminathan, clarification on Swaminathan, when we do calming meditation, we talk about I, like we say, may I be free from anger, may I be getting good health. When it comes to Swaminathan Vipassana, like insight, we are seeing that I is a illusion, right? Swaminathan, we want to understand that there's no permanent I. Swaminathan, if you have few minutes, please explain the difference there.
So in Samatha, when you practice loving kindness, we always begin with yourself, because simply if a person doesn't love himself, there is they can't practice loving kindness to others. Because you have to come to accept the reality first. Reality is everyone, they like themselves the most. Buddha say, we don't love any other person. Because say, now think of the simile of the mother and the child. If a mother, you have to practice loving kindness just as a mother would love her only child. Okay? So if a mother loves her child, no matter what, she has to be there for the child. No? Being there for the child means the mother has to be in good mental and physical health. If the mother doesn't care for herself, how will she care for the child? Will she be there for the child? She's going to be there for the child. She has to take care of herself first. That's why only a person who cares for oneself will care for the child. That's why we deal with ourselves.
Bhante, you mentioned now, like during the meditation, you mentioned about lights, right? Like what's the like when you're meditating, you see like a bright light kind of thing. What's the Pali word for that, Bhante?
Like we say, like abhassar, like aloka is like abhassar.
Abhassar.
Abhassar is the radiance. So the light that I think that is, it might be different from like each like if you are going to look it up, is that the idea to look up the term?
Yes, Bhante, because Bhante, I've heard like something like this before, but they use the word nimitta.
Patibhaga nimitta.
That is like you find it in Abhidharma and Kasina. When you practice Kasina Bhavana, you take nimitta like Kasina nimitta, and some focus on certain lights. But these things are we practice because there are so many dangers. Like there is no end to what the pitfalls are there. Many pitfalls. So without proper guidance, like good practice to take up, but you are very safe practicing according to the Jesus of the Buddha. And this, as you learn today, these are very clear now. These guidelines are very clear, and you can clearly see how our teacher Upasana has like he has made the meditation, each of the meditation, formulated them based on suttas. How they are clearly aligned with the suttas, the teachings of the Buddha, the practicing of meditation as we do in loving kindness. So better to keep to them. There are many meditators that are not directly in relevance to the suttas that you should avoid from practice. because there are many pitfalls in doing so. And we have come across people also who have, there are various troubles. Okay, there is no limit to explain. Okay, anyone else?
Bante, follow-up question regarding the light, the radiance that you're mentioning. So in meditation, so the light that Buddha is saying, is it already part of our body? I mean, wherein the light will come out from our body, or we have to continue practicing so that it will be radiant? Because in science, they said that we have what we call the body aura. So is it part of that body aura or not? No.
It's something you experience in your mind. Like just don't focus on that. Right? That is not the focus of the.
Bante, can I tell you my experience about the light? My Jayantame. I had experience that was very surprised. And right after yoga and heavy exercise, I relaxed myself. So it started coming from the eyes. As soon as you close your eyes, it's a light started coming from your eyes, and it's like a spreading all over. Then after that, it started going around your face and whole body, turning. So it's like in a non-stop. So that was my experience about this light, not the meditation, but the body relaxation. And then you close your eyes and stay quietly. Then the light started coming up from your whole body. It's just like a spreading all over. So it happened about 3-4 times. Then after that, it disappeared. It's like some kind of rays going 3-4 colors from the eyes and around your whole body, and started non-stop until you force yourself to come out from that. So that was my experience about 5-6 years ago.
So there can be various experiences with regard to these things, and there are various causes. Then causes, we can't say why this is for each person. That is why we always discourage sharing experiences with regard to, in particular, the meditative states, because then others also might try to look for this thing. So in that case, for each person, like, see, just close your eyes when it's like there's a light bulb in the room, you see lights. Isn't that the case? And you switch it on and off. So there is no point in focusing on the light. If the window is open and the sun rays coming in, then you see different light on that side. These are natural causes in most cases, and for some, because when, like, so just don't focus on, because there is no end to talking on the matter. Because for each person is different. That is why here it is clearly said, for some experience this state. For others, it's. So I remember when Lobsang's teaching the sutta, I remember him saying, like, all you have to gather from this is that each person is different. Each person's experience is different. So, like, you don't try to copy any other person's experience or follow other person. If there's any one person you have to copy in this world with regard to meditation, is the Buddha and what he has taught. So he was the first one to purify his mind of the defilements, and he has clearly taught us how to do it. So that's more than sufficient for any person, any disciple of the Buddha, to progress in the practice. Okay?
Bante.
Yeah. Yes? Who was that?
It was Daniel. He was trying to speak.
Yeah. So, Bante, actually, another question about the lights now. Not everyone gets the lights, right? But I'm guessing, like, the people who do get the lights, does that mean like they're closer to a jhana?
For a person that experiences the light, the meditation becomes easy for that person. Okay? Because even in the sutta, we came across the person with the, say, he experienced huge lights, like more pure light. Pure light means his hindrances are subdued. And he's, in that case, in the sutta, it said like he was devoid of restlessness, he was the physical exhaustion. He was devoid of these things, regret and remorse. So likewise, that means the hindrances are subdued in that person. For that person, meditation is easy And he will, of course, if he keep on practicing, attain the jhana side. So that is there.
Okay.
That is a
Okay. Okay. So Bhante, not everyone gets the light, right? It's just like a very few people.
all the wish can be there. It's all common. You know, there was a monk in the time of the Buddha. This monk wanted to talk with the Devas. So the monk came and said, I would like to talk to Devas, please teach me how to do it. So Buddha taught him to develop meditation so and so that he could gain this quality, gain this ability, the skill. So Buddha taught them, he practiced the manner Buddha taught, and he got the skill. He could speak with the Deva. No, he could see the Devas, but he couldn't speak. Now I can see the Devas, he can't communicate. Now he came to the Buddha and said, Buddha, I want to now talk with Devas, I can only see them. Please help me to go further. Buddha said, just forget it. That's all he said. So this time the monk got upset. Why now? He taught me to get this skill. Now I can see the Devas, but still I can't talk to them. So what am I going to do? Buddha is not teaching me to go further. And he was upset. Then monks got the wind of this and told the Buddha, and Buddha said, monks, the reason for that is he doesn't have the merits for that. As I remember, there is the case in the past, this is past time. In the past life, he has, I think, hit a monk on the ear, and that monk had lost his hearing. So in this world, in this life, he can't get that divine hearing. So likewise, there are the past karma. So that is why our teacher says, like, we are like an iceberg. You know, with an iceberg, the huge portion of the iceberg is underwater. Only a small portion is above the water. So likewise, what is the past, what we have done, said and done in the samsara, all that is from us. And how they affect the things we do in our life, we don't know these things. So you don't have to focus on this, like look for these things. Just focus on the practice. So you will into past merits and the merits you have put here and the effort you put here and now, you will reap the benefits. That's how it works. Okay?
Bhante, can you repeat again the light? What the name of the light that Bhante said to Daniel just now?
Name of the light. There's no particular name. This is the name of the light. Just like it's light. Okay.
So it's not called.
Yeah, maybe you should look up the Pali of the Sutta, then find a term for that. Like it is not a name.
Bhante, Patibhaga Nimitta.
Yeah, like no, that's the Abhidhamma, and how when you develop certain meditative state, like you come across certain stages of meditation. I think better to not dwell upon that, just understand it as a light to experience. Okay, like that's more than enough, that understanding. Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
I think now you're feeling sleepy. I don't know what time it is. Nirodha, there is audio. Is it clear for you? No, maybe it's too late to ask the question. But some say it's not clear for them. One comment is there for not clear audio. The others I think are fine. And there is a slight change from next time around. It's compulsory to turn on your cameras. Because here and now, if you are joining the program, it's like that's how it should be. It's the proper way, out of respect for the Dhamma, the Sangha. All are required to turn on their cameras. That's the least expectation. You shows your commitment. Because when I began this program, before me, it was Ronnie Kittisanga who did the program. What Sangha told me, like he had been telling over and over again, like to switch on their cameras, but they are not doing that. Sangha said, so please encourage. I don't think it's proper for a monk to plead from the lay people, like turn on your cameras, turn on your cameras. That's not proper. We should not lower the standards of the Dhamma, because what we teach is the teaching of the Buddha, not my thing. So that is all that should be held onto its standard. No? Should be kept higher. We can't lower the standards of the Dhamma to fit our framework. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen with me. So it's my way or no way. So if you are joining next time around, please get your cameras ready, and also maybe possibly, like, if it's preferable to have your audio also, so it's a discussion. So we can discuss, and like, it's nice to see you, and then there's respect in doing so, because you are respecting others also, because others are joining with their video. So also doing on time. So these are things that should not be repeated, I think. So next time when you join, all of you, I think, because it's a very easy choice, a Dhamma, just switching your camera on, or whether you are going to like pass this opportunity on. Compulsory from next time around to, because I saw this last time around, even Jivanand Saina said, told you to switch on the cameras, and still in the POE program, I experienced this, but still the cameras, Arjun also mentioned again and again, so the cameras, they did not switch on. There may be certain circumstances, but I think if you try, you can work around it. It's quite easy to do that. So please switch on your cameras. I don't care of the background. I don't think others also do how your background is going to look. Just your commitment. So your commitment, your respect to the monks, also the teachings of the Buddha in particular. You know, there was an instance, this is not something to be taken lightly. There was an instance when Buddha came to see some monks. The monks were having a Dhamma talk in the kuti. Buddha stood there for hours until the Dhamma talk was over. The Buddha, the one who taught the teachings, out of respect to the Dhamma. Once the Dhamma talk was over, Buddha knocked on the door and the monks opened. And they were alarmed, and like they were like upset that Buddha said, my back hurts a bit, I want to lie down because I've been standing here for hours. And he actually praised that monk who gave the Dhamma talk. He gave a very good Dhamma talk. And the monk who gave the Dhamma talk was upset that Buddha had to be standing. Buddha said, no, I enjoy the talk, it's very nice. So see the respect of the Buddha. So Buddha is the one who decided the Dhamma is going to be my teacher, because there was no one you can compare to the Buddha. Buddha found that no one who has similar virtue, wisdom, or concentration likewise myself. So I should keep the Dhamma as my teacher. So that is the status the Buddha gave to the Dhamma. So we should do the same, I think. So please, when you join next time, it is compulsory to switch on your cameras. Okay, that's all for today. So may all the minutes today we have acquired together, myself by teaching the Dhamma, yourself by listening, and also discussing the Dhamma, we share with all the Devas and Brahmanas, and may they too realize the Honorable Truth in this Gautama. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And may also these merits be shared with all our long relatives, and may they too, in as soon as possible in another life, realize the Honorable Truth in this Gautama. Honorable Truth and be free from this samsara journey of suffering. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And may also these merits be shared with our teacher, Pima Swami Nansi, and may he have long life and also realize the Honorable Truth in this Gautama Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And may also these merits be for our teachers, our parents, our relatives, our friends, and may they also realize the Honorable Truth in this Gautama Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And also may these merits be for all of us, and may we too be well and happy and have the opportunity to practice these teachings of the Buddha, acquire more and more merits, and have a good rebirth in the heavenly worlds and realize the Honorable Truth in this Gautama Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Now we will ask for forgiveness from Buddha Dhamma Sangha. Kayena vacha chittena pamadena maya katam Achayam kamami bhanti viripanya tatadita Kayena vacha chittena pamadena mayakata Achayam kamami dhamma sandittika akadita Kayena vacha chittena pamadena mayakata Achayam kamami sangha tinnaketammanite Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, I will soon now. Abhivadan to this Chamada Chan Chataro Dhamma Yanti Ayuan Stammanam Ayarogya Sampati Sangha Sampati Ato Nibbana Sampati Punyate Sampati. May you be all be very happy.
We like to ask forgiveness from Bhantes as well. O Kasavandami Bhante Maya Katam Punyang Samina Namoditabang Samina Katam Maya Sadhu Sadhu Anumodami O Kasavandami Katam Sabbang Gachayam Kamtame Bhante
Okasa kamami bante, Satyampi okasa kamami bante, Satyampi okasa kamami bante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Namo Buddhaya Bhante.